This Wednesday's webinar, Reporting on Grant Outcomes in the New Normal. As you know, this is part of our ongoing series of webinars about grant seeking during the COVID crisis. We have been delving into bite-sized topics that we hope are relevant and hopeful and helpful to you as you face the choices and challenges of what is a continually ongoing crisis here. Today, we're going to discuss how to manage reporting on grants in a year where almost no one's work has gone according to plan. So I am Matt Carter. I am Director for Learning at Grants Plus, and I'm happy today to be joined by my colleague, Laura Altieri, who's one of our engagement specialists. And she is right now working to help multiple clients through the ongoing crisis with reporting and submitting and all of that fun stuff. So a couple notes here on logistics. We always have a Q&A session at the end of every webinar. So we have about 20 plus minutes of content and then a Q&A session at the end. Do not be afraid at any point to submit a question through the Q&A feature on your control bar for Zoom. We will get to those, and we might even break into what we're talking if you send one outside of the session. So please don't hesitate to send those. And as always, following today, we'll share a recording of the webinar and some links to resources to help your organization get through the crisis. So a little bit about Grants Plus for those of you who don't know us. I'm looking at our list and see that there are plenty of people joining us today who do know who we are, but just quickly, we are a professional grant-seeking firm that since 2007 has partnered with hundreds of nonprofit organizations and foundations across the country to help them build stronger relationships and to help organizations get higher grant revenues. Our mission is helping organizations to be confident and successful in the grant-seeking process, no matter where they are in their journey. So whether they are getting their first grant or their 1,000th grant, we are there. And what's significant about we're celebrating our 13th birthday this week. And what is significant about that is that we got our start essentially as the 2008-2009 financial crisis was happening. So we are prepared to help clients and friends help get through to the other side of a crisis. That is what we started doing when we began. So today's topics, we're going to talk about a few things. Why reporting is different this year, embracing change in your reporting, and discussing what happened and what will happen, which is a change for reporting. Usually reporting is just what happened, but we are recommending that this year be a little bit different, like everything else this year. But first and foremost, before we get into any content here, I want to remind everyone to not surprise your funders at the end of a grant. That was true last year. It will be true 10 years from now. It's true today. Don't let a funder find out about substantial program changes from your grant report. We will rarely ever hear of a funder that takes back funding if you talk to them partway through a program and say, hey, things are not going according to plan, as long as you're talking to that funder and as long as they are kept in the loop. What we do hear sometimes is funders angry that their grant was not spent as planned without consulting them. So odds are that you have already talked to your funders about any changes facing your organization because of COVID, and anything you need to change about your work, you have probably discussed it with them, but if not, now is the time. Well, 30 minutes from now when we are done, but now is the time to do that. Do not surprise your funders with your reports. So with that out of the way, what are we hearing from funders? So we've heard from a lot of funders, obviously, that they understand that many, if not most things that their grantees are doing are not going to go according to plan this year. Many are being flexible with their reporting formats, with deadlines, et cetera, in recognition of this. And some are actually even saying, you know, don't report. We know that's an additional burden. But we're going to recommend that even if you do have the opportunity to not submit a report this year, submit one anyway as a best practice in stewardship. And maybe if a funder has told you that you don't have to submit a report or you don't have to submit a formal report, that's your chance to be a little more creative or to do something that is not following a normal report routine. But we would recommend, just as part of stewardship, making sure that you're letting the funder know what you are doing. We're also hearing that funders want to know that the organizations they fund have a plan, even among the ongoing uncertainty of COVID. So this year's reports, like we said, are an opportunity to not just show what you have done already, but what your organization will do next. And generally, funders understand that very few organizations are going to be able to go back to what they were doing in January in the next 12 months. Unfortunately, it looks like the COVID is here for a while and uncertainty is here for a while, and funders realize this. But we want to make sure when you're doing your reporting for this year that you're able to talk about what you've learned from your work so far. What are you doing to adapt, and what is going to change in the next grant period? So what that means is we are suggesting that this year, your report is an opportunity to play show and tell. I have to say, if we took an anonymous poll of nonprofits and funders alike, and I don't actually want to take that because a wise person once told me to be careful of what you're allowed to know. I doubt that anyone's favorite part of the grants process is reporting. Either things went according to plan and the report feels like a formality, or things did not go as well as you had hoped, which adds some discomfort to the reporting process, or things went better than expected and you probably already talked to the funder about it. But this year is a different year. Reporting on your grants is more important than ever in helping you show funders how you are making a difference and advancing their mission and vision. So this year is almost like your report is the preface to your next application. It's not a given for this year that you are going to report back and say that you did what you set out to do. You want to show that your organization has been through some things, whether positive or negative, and you want to show the funder that you have done something and are advancing their work even in the face of everything going on with COVID. So we're also saying this year, embrace creativity if you can. So show how you went above and beyond, or even how your organization is just surviving. We have talked about being open and honest quite a lot in this series, and we're hearing that from funders a lot, that is crucial right now. So sometimes your report can just be, we made it through unscathed, or we made it through with most of our staff, and that might be enough. But being creative in what you are reporting this year can be key. So one of my favorite examples is we saw an organization that actually made a short video for their funders, because they provide care to people with developmental disabilities, and they can't do that remotely. They have to have staff there. So they actually made a video about how they were able to provide direct, compassionate care while using masks and gowns and gloves. And in 20 seconds, it showed how this year was different because the staff was all masked up and in gowns and gloves, and not exactly radiating warmth, unfortunately. But it also changed what hadn't changed, or showed what hadn't changed at all, which was personal care for individuals from a caring staff. So something had changed, but something was still the same. And it would have been hard to describe that, but in 20 seconds of video, that was out there. So the other thing, before we assume that every single organization has faced dramatic change and everything is different this year, I do want to recognize that in some cases, the best laid plans still worked. Not every organization has had radical changes, and for some organizations, work has gone pretty much according to plan. But reporting on that as if everything around you is normal is somewhat disingenuous and might make a funder think that your organization does not understand what is going on in the wider world. So even if you're an organization where things have gone largely according to plan, still explain why your work was able to happen as planned, even as the COVID crisis was ongoing. Explain if that will continue. If somehow you are an organization where everything going on with COVID is not going to affect what you do, explain why that is and explain how it can continue. Or if something might change, articulate what that is and let the funder that you know, that you understand, and that you have a plan. So with that, I'm going to say I will safely bet that this does not apply to the majority of organizations that we're talking to right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk about what to do when things have decidedly not gone according to plan.
Thanks, Matt. For most organizations that we're working with on a daily basis, things have definitely changed. Most agencies have done a great job meeting these changes head on. However, explaining these changes to funders can really feel daunting. So the first step in tackling reporting in this crazy time is to feel comfortable with the fact that this is not a typical year. Don't try and say that things went according to plan. Things are different, own it. This is because both the needs of the community and your organization have changed in the last 5 months. So in your report, you want to focus back on the need. Showcase in your report how your organization has adjusted to meet the changing needs. This can mean adjusting your program delivery model. For example, providing services in person to providing service virtually, or changing the scope of the services you offer. For example, providing more crisis mental health support than originally intended. Think about other shifts you have made and how they pertain to the need. Use your report as an opportunity to showcase how your organization helps the community deal with COVID-19. This really is an opportunity for you to be the hero of the narrative. You'll want to make sure that you articulate how did the community needs change, how did you address that change, and what was the result. And to reiterate what Matt said earlier, this should not be the first time your funders are hearing about this. Now, in the examples that you see here, a compelling approach that many agencies are taking is to first explain your original plan, then explain how the community need changed, and then explain how you shifted your work to address that need. You really want to illustrate that though these changes you made were unexpected, they were thoughtful and implemented with the needs of the community in mind. Now, part of the open and honest theme is reporting accurate numbers, even if they illustrate a change in the scope or reach of your program. You want to tell funders not only how your program changed qualitatively, but also show the impact that they had on your numbers. These changes look different for every organization and program. The changes in numbers can fluctuate, go up and down, or some maybe haven't had their numbers change too much. For example, some organizations are providing more concentrated services for a smaller number of people, while other organizations are doing the best that they can to meet unanticipated need. We have one behavioral health client that is seeing 700 new patients since the COVID-19 pandemic began. So they're trying to really meet an increased need with the same or a reduction in the resources that they have. Now, we recognize that reporting numbers that are different and often very different from your original goals can feel uncomfortable. Usually in a grant report, we want the numbers that we report to be as close to the numbers we projected as possible. But the numbers and the narrative should complement and explain each other. If your narrative clearly explains a change in the need, the funders will expect your numbers to change. So again, the whole theme of today is own the change and report it back to the funder. Now, after discussing what changes you made in the last 5 months, turn to where things stand today. If your program changed to meet the immediate crisis during lockdowns, have they changed again to address the new normal that we're living in? Have some of the changes that you implemented in the spring become part of your daily work? We had one client see participation increase tremendously when providing mental health services via telephone. The number of missed appointments plummeted in recent months. They now intend to implement remote visits into their services permanently. In many ways, these innovations spurred by COVID-19 are the silver lining of the pandemic. Think about what you've learned in the last 5 months and what you're going to take with you moving forward. Now, although not the focus of the report, illustrating that you're thinking about the future is important, especially if you're reporting to an ongoing funder. You want to take the report as an opportunity to show that you're proactively thinking about the future of your work and explain how the need and your work will continue to change moving forward. When thinking about this question, note that we use the term time horizon. This is deliberately vague. If we knew how long this current new normal would last, we'd be in Vegas trying to win big. No one has a crystal ball, not even the funders. No one expects you to see into the future. But you do want to show that you are one step ahead and that you're ready for the unexpected. Now, in the example we have here, the agency is using the current reality and their assumptions about the pandemic to illustrate how they'll continue to carry out their work into the future.
Thanks, Laura. And thank you for setting up the change in numbers for me, because we have to talk about financial changes now, which are, I think, always scary to people. So continuing on everything we have said, you can see on here, most years a financial report should mirror the proposal's budget. This is not most years. Don't be afraid to also be open and honest in your financial report. So if you have changed how you're doing your work and you're talking about that in the narrative, how you spend has probably changed too. So you want to make sure you're showing that in the financial report. And ideally, that will set up a discussion for your next grant. These are the financial changes we saw. This is what we're going to need to do this next year. Obviously, where people are seeing this the most is income sources changing. And even those who have managed to maintain their income, it is probably not what was in the original budget for the proposal that you submitted. Obviously, organizations are losing gala and event money, but some are making that up with emergency grants or pulling out of their rainy day fund or things like that. So even if the total is close, you still want to give a picture of what happened financially, again, because that will help set you up for your next request. Obviously, too, were there unexpected major expenses? And we had a client of ours who, again, another one that had to continue face-to-face work, and ended up spending 6 figures for protective equipment for their staff because there was no way around that. They weren't going to ask staff to provide it, and they obviously did not budget for everybody to be masked up all the time, but that was in there. And really, how did your spending change overall? We know that there are a lot of people that are facing program cutbacks, staff furloughs, cutting services to balance the budget, the realities of that. But we're also seeing, organizations that are increasing their services to meet needs, or that are cutting program A, which was not really core to what they were doing, to bolster program B to make sure that that can meet the needs that they're seeing. So the key on this is remembering that your budget report needs to tell the same story as your narrative when you're doing your report. Also, don't be afraid to demonstrate the need for more funding. This may mean showing a deficit in your financial report, which I know is very scary. Previously, that would have been a very frightening thing to be upfront with a funder about. But you are reporting to someone who has already invested in you. You're reporting to a current funder. They obviously care about what you do. They care about the population you serve. So you don't need to hide from them that you may have more financial need, whether it's this year or next year. This really is a way for you to show that you need continuing investment and that you are doing what you can do to keep moving your organization forward. So with that, I'm going to move us over to Q&A. We've actually had a couple of questions come in, and a reminder, please use the Q&A feature. And I am actually going to toss this one to Laura first. One that came in says, what if a funder does not assign a program officer or other person to speak with? How do you engage a foundation that has effectively set up a wall that does not allow regular communication?
That's a great question. I think I would usually those foundations rely heavily on their reporting processes. So I think that for a foundation like this, sending whether a formal or even an informal letter to the address or the email address that you submitted your application to is a way that you can be sure that they'll see the report that you're sending in. I think for those foundations in particular, the report is really critical.
And I will add to that, Laura, that there are some funders that, while they are technically a foundation, they kind of give as an individual, and they love your organization. They're going to fund you no matter what, and they may be structured in such a way that you are going to get the same $10,000 every year no matter what. So you may not make a big change based on what you're reporting, but it's still important, like Laura said, that you get something to them, and you've sort of done your part. Whether they read it or not is on them. But just knowing that is out there and that you have explained to them kind of what changes have happened, what you're going through, and anything like that. We had another question come in that said, what do we do if a funder's format is not great for adding the extra detail that we just talked about? So Laura, do you have a thought on that?
Yes. So I would say you should embrace the budget as a way of illustrating the changes that you have made. And I would also say that follow the format, but then you can also follow up with a less formal report that lets you tell your story. Don't make it 10 pages, but a quick letter that's a page or two will help.
Great, thank you. And I agree. I know, I said early on, I think if you took a poll, both of funders and grantees, the report is nobody's favorite part of the process. But I really do think this year that, that is a critical thing. Obviously, like Laura said, don't make it 10 pages. Don't send them a phone book of everything that ever happened. But usually if a funder has requirements for a short report, that's because they don't necessarily want to read a whole lot. Having said that, again, this is a year with a lot of change, so adding a little something extra is a good idea. And frankly, that can come up too if you're engaging, you're sending in your small report to them, and then you want to go to them for another grant. You've got the opportunity to, in that whole cultivation process for your renewal, to talk more and to maybe send over a fact sheet or send over something like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the formal report process. We had another question too that said, "What about what if we had sent an interim report recently, and things have changed since then?" I would say, again, this is sort of our default of talk to the funder, recognizing that we did have the question about what do you do when a funder has nobody to talk to. But ideally, you will be able to talk to somebody there and ask them how they want to handle that. You may hear from a funder that they understand things are different, you're making changes. You've got all this going on. They're fine with that. They know what's happening across the sector, and just send it to us in a final report. You might have a program officer that just wants to check in, or a staff member from the foundation that wants to check in about how you are spending their money, making sure that they're still okay with how it's being spent. But again, I think funders are being very flexible on this. And I don't know if you have contrary experience, Laura.
No, I agree completely with you on that.
Okay, great.
If we can go back just for 2
Yeah.
seconds, you made a point a few minutes ago about smaller foundations that might be run by families. We worked with a client earlier this year, actually, and even though the foundation did not require a report, we submitted just a courtesy report. It was a pretty informal letter with an update about the program, and this is pre-COVID. But the foundation came back to our client and said that they had never received a simple thank you letter and an update because they never asked for it. So I think that even for your funders who are not asking for an update, sending them a thank you, a thank you for being with us in these times, as well as an update on what you're changing, can really have an impact.
That actually reminds me of a story we actually talked about, I think a couple webinars ago, on emergency funds. And I know we didn't address here in this webinar emergency funds directly because some are requiring reports, some are not. Again, all of this sort of applies to that, except they know they were funding an emergency. But we had heard from one of our clients who said thank you to multiple to the non-lead funder. So, as a community foundation was a lead funder and a few other foundations were on there, and they sent thank yous to all of those funders and heard back the same thing. We're not the lead funder. Nobody said thank you to us yet. Thank you for saying thank you. And I would say sort of in that same vein, there's value to sending a report, even if it's only required to go through one thing. Sending sort of an informal report or just sort of showing what good you are doing to everyone that was within that fund, not just the lead funder, and possibly not just to the required funder or to the required funder for the report, because there is definitely an opportunity for some stewardship in there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't caught this from Laura and I, one of the main things here is this is an opportunity for you to really make a report as part of your cultivation and make it be a genuine part of the grant cycle instead of the formality that has kind of been for years. We have one more question here, and we've got time, I think, for just one more. What if your organization's future plans are very much still up in the air? For example, we are a youth service organization and our fall plans are still undecided as our school district's plans are still undecided. And first off, I feel for you. That is so many of our clients right now. And as a parent, I'm not sure if my kids are here for another 2 weeks or another 3 months. Laura, I've got some thoughts on that, but if you want to go first, feel free.
Yeah, I would say illustrate that to the best of your ability, show that number one, you're working with your partners so that you can implement an effective outcome. So if you're working with a school district, say that directly. I would also say if you are planning, if you're thinking about different ways that you can still carry out your program, so for example, if you have the infrastructure where you could provide services virtually, but at the same time, you're also looking at providing services in person, just say that. Say, we don't know what it'll look like, but we're prepared to provide services either way.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And especially if the spending is going to be radically different one way or another, if it is, we are either going to spend $100,000 hiring tutors who are going to go in person, or we are going to spend $95,000 on an online system that the kids can use. Have those options be in there as well, showing that you are, not just programmatically ready to go, but that you have thought this through, that you know who you're going to use, you know who the vendor might be, etc. So it really is, unfortunately, showing that you have thought about these multiple pathways and have got a solution for no matter what happens, which is time consuming and uses brain power, and it is just an unfortunate reality. So with that, unfortunately, we are wrapping up on our time here. I want to add a couple more things, and thanks to everybody who asked questions. Couple resources coming your way. So just as a reminder, we have got two resources right now as we are dealing with multiple crises in this country. Obviously, a lot of funders are putting a lot of money behind racial justice grants right now, and we are keeping track of those. And also our grant seeking during the COVID-19 crisis guide, which has started as a compilation of emergency funders that surprisingly a lot are still accepting applications. And also just general resources, so links to past webinars, things like that. Those are both on there. And we will send a link to those when we follow up. And what we will follow up with is a recording of this webinar, some of our grant seeking resources. And I will say, I'm going to make a plug again. We are offering free consultations with our senior experts. And I say this every week. I swear they are not a sales tactic. A lot of what's going on, sometimes you just need a 20-minute call with another professional to bounce some ideas off of. And, we are here for that. We want to help our sector. So feel free to send an email to info@grantsplus. Also, with upcoming webinars, we are taking a slight vacation. Our next webinar is going to be September 16th, and that is going to be Grant Research Essentials, efficiently finding your new funders, because obviously there are a lot of organizations facing some financial shortfalls that are going to need to find some new funders. And then in October, we are going to talk about Grant Writing for Justice, language that empowers your community, and that is going to be about using language in your grants and other communications that really talks about who you're serving in ways that make them not a victim, essentially. So I think that will be great. I'm looking forward to that one as well, and we may have a guest on that one. So thank you for joining us. You've got our contact info up here if you need to talk to either of us. And we will hopefully see you for our next webinar in September. Have a great rest of the summer, and thank you for joining.